What if you could help others to find the power to heal themselves? Physically, emotionally, and spiritually.
When I started teaching my classes, it was in 2002, and I was just doing the past life regressions and contacting the subconscious part. But then as the time went on and we found how powerful this was and what we could do with it, a lot of the students began saying, advanced past life regression doesn't really tell what it's all about. This is so much more than that. We think you should change the name. So it was a few years ago we decided to change the name to Quantum Healing Hypnosis Technique. And this is the healing technique that we've now been teaching since 2002, that's 12 years.
What if you could time travel with them? Visit mythical places or angelic realms, other worlds, other galaxies. Help others to speak to their higher selves. You can. Dolores has taught thousands of people from across the world how to use QHHT, and now you can learn her method by going directly to dolorescannon.com. And don't forget to mention the discount code MORETALKS.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from Amsterdam and across the world online. You're now watching The More Show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next couple of hours, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. Now on today's show, I'm about to be joined with my guest, John Hogue. Now John writes on the subjects of the occult, parapsychology, mysticism and prophecy. Now he's considered a world authority on Nostradamus and is the best-selling author of numerous books, including Nostradamus, the Complete Prophecies, and Nostradamus, the New Millennium, the Millennium Book of Prophecy, the Last Pope and Messiahs, and the Visions and Prophecies for the Second Coming. Now his work has brought him international acclaim, and he has been published in 18 languages and sold over 1 million copies worldwide. In addition, he has appeared on over 700 radio and television shows on 3 continents. John Hogue, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin.
John, it is such a privilege to have you on. You have no idea. Even today, I was just listening to a previous interview because I thought, before you come on, I've got a bit of time with this interview, actually, which is unusual for my schedule right now. So I thought, look, I'll search you up on YouTube, and there was an old Art Bell interview on there. And what a great interview as well. This was back in, 98, 99 maybe?
Yes.
So you've been doing this for many years, right?
I started doing TV and radio in August of 1987, and I am probably the most, as a Nostradamus and prophecy expert, that is not ideologically or dogmatically suppressed, but looking at all types of prophetic traditions outside the dogmatic box. I have probably been over 1,000 radio interviews, and I stopped counting the TV interviews and documentaries after 100. So that was a while ago. So, and then on top of that, I'm quite prolific with my writing. I have almost 800 articles in HogueProphecy.com that looks, since 1999, looks at the current events and trends in prophecy. And also I'm at the moment working on my 41st book, and I am in about 20 languages now.
It's incredible. I read something somewhere. Tell me this is true. You've sold well over 1 million copies of your books accumulatively.
1,170,000, I think. Yes. Yeah,
Wow.
yes.
But that's
And
that's really good for book sales in this subject. In the esoteric, paranormal, spiritual, fringe kind of subjects like this. That's amazing.
well, and a couple times, this was before there were ebooks, but on two occasions I became number one in all the book sales for Amazon. I did that with The Last Pope in 1998, which looked at the prophecies of Saint Malachi, the papal prophecies. And I did it again, but kind of in a dubious distinction because of the interest that came to my work for what happened in September 11th, because I had been since 1983 evolving understanding of what a certain three quatrains of Nostradamus might actually entail about an attack on New York. And so I just finished a book right now, very autobiographical book called Nostradamus Premonitions of 911, which looks at that whole process from 1983 to the day before the attack. And then during the attack, seeing it's kind of a detective story about how you have certain theories, you go down certain trails of clues, and as you get closer, it's kind of backwards from the murder mystery because the crime hasn't happened yet. People, as far as centuries ago, like Nostradamus, had seen the crime, and then people like me are on the trail like a detective that it's almost like Philip K. Dick's precog situation, precog crime in reality, where you know a crime is going to happen, you know it's going to happen perhaps somewhere around the year 1999, although there are other clues in those prophecies that indicate that September is a very important month. And since nothing happened in 99 in the seventh month, that's what September means, even though it's now become the ninth month. You look and you realize that, okay, July of 1999, nothing happened. July of 2000, if he meant the year and 7 months, nothing happened. But September 2001, something definitely happened. So it makes one look back at the number 1999, 1999. You realize, well, if September month is here, then, and it's definitely a king of terror descending from the skies. And that metaphor is linked to several other prophecies that tease out more details. Then you find out that, well, maybe this is a number anagram, a switch. 1999 should be 9111, September month. And so that's where I came, unfortunately, with hindsight, to that understanding. But the important thing about this book was it was answering a challenge from something that always shadows a Nostradamus scholar, including, especially if somebody reaches a world renowned as I have, is that you have these people who are professional skeptics, which are actually cynics in skeptical clothing. They're often Las Vegas magicians who have kind of passed their prime, and now they got to find some other flim flam to keep themselves going. And so, and I've had some pretty illustrious ones go after me, James Randi, um, and Penn and Teller, who actually, in the case of Penn and Teller, they snuck in a film crew to. I invited. They wanted a crew from Showtime came, the network, and they said, well, "We have this new show. We don't really know. We don't have a name for it yet, but we just want to shoot some footage of you. Would you be interested in doing that? We have some questions." And I said, well, fine, naively. I said, okay, no problem. So we set up in my little studio here and we did it. And later I found out that I was the first guest in the pilot for the bullshit show, as they appropriately call their show. And I was whack job number one, as Teller said. So I had the distinction of being the first person to be eviscerated, and James Randi also ganged in on that as well. And the reason why they had to do this is because these people can never be straight. I have tried 4 times to get James Randi to do a kind of frontline Foursquare interview and debate. That's a situation where I say something, he replies, I reply to his reply, and then he has a chance to have the last word. Then he says something, I reply, he replies to that, and I have the last word. Because what often happens with the skeptics in these TV shows I've been on is they always get the last word. And it's gotten to such a habit that they can say anything and not have it challenged. For instance, in this, one of the mass premonitions I look at in the book is all the people who documented their foresight about the Titanic sinking. And I did a show many years ago where on TV where we talked about Morgan Robertson's famous short story where he back in somewhere around 1898 or somewhere around then he started writing this story because he used an astral channel to do his stories, and he detailed this ship called the Titan that would sink in a moonless April night. And he then described the lifeboats and the numbers of people and how it would hit an iceberg and all these things that are near about the exact details. None of it's like exactly spot on, but except for April night, moonless night, and obviously off the coast of Labrador, somewhere around there, coming into New York. And the thing is that I said, here's a man who dozens of years before 1912 saw all this and he even almost named it. He saw the name. He got actually the guts of the name Titan for Titanic as the qualifier of Titan. And this is all the skeptic could say. This is kind of grumpy professor. He was like, well, at least he didn't call it the little mouse. And I'm thinking, oh, come on. This is why people are getting more and more stupid every generation, because this kind of stuff gets away. Even in fringy stuff like what I do, that kind of stuff is done. And I could have, if I'd done a Foursquare interview, I could say, look, first off, it's the essence of Titan is Titanic. That's pretty close. Secondly, there are over 360 words for largesse and giantness in the English language that I estimate. So you have 360 to 1 possibility of saying gargantuan or something else. So this is pretty close. You can't just blow it off as a little mouse. And so then that would have challenged these people to do better. So anyway, there was a time where I did several hours where these producers had Randy in Florida, me up in Seattle, and we were negotiating this Foursquare thing, and it looked like after finally got the guy squared away, Foursquared away, I said, okay, let's put that in writing. And the producers pause on the phone and says, no, we don't want to put that in writing. I says, well, no, if you don't put it in writing, it's not going to happen. So you just wasted Mr. Randy and my entire afternoon. And so it's the only way that they could actually interview me was through a sneak attack, taking me out of context, slandering me. And I mean, the ultimate slander is that these people, and this is the challenge in the book, that in one of the few documentaries I didn't appear in the last 30 years in about Nostradamus was Nostradamus 500 years later. And Penn and Teller were in that as the skeptics. And Teller's usually quiet and doesn't say anything. Penn is the big bombastic bear of a fellow who's made this statement that, if there were actually anything in the books of Nostradamus, and if somebody knew that the attack was coming, like on September 10th, I mean, if he knew the planes were coming, he could have warned. And he in so many ways, he said that anybody who didn't tell people about it, if they knew, they should all go to trial, and they are the definition of evil. Bombastic, over the top. I mean, it's no wonder he's appeared so often on Donald Trump's Celebrity Apprentice. They are like-minded, a couple bombastic people, and so the book Nostradamus, Premonitions of 911, is also a answer to that challenge, because actually it's a good challenge. The question is, did anybody see it before it came? Did anybody warn? Were there large-scale shows that Mr. Penn, because he's obviously, like most cynics, a very lazy researcher, maybe things happened. So I took up his challenge and wrote this book. And in the book, I show that I qualify my own documented process, even saying that it would happen shortly after 2001. things that were developing. My dinner in New York in 1994 with Hans Holzer, the late Hans
Oh
Holzer, the
wow, you got to meet him.
parapsychologist.
Yep, I know. Yep.
Yes, we got really close, and I guess it's because Hogue and Holzer are next to each other in the bookstores. But the he once at dinner he I was doing a book tour for one of my books, Nostradamus: The New Revelations, and in 1994, and he we were up in East Riverside, uptown, and he was saying that he was very concerned. So many psychics were getting a feeling that the attack that happened the year before in 1993 in February, where they tried to blow up the underground parking lot so that it would collapse one building onto the other. And my goodness, if that had succeeded, it would have killed at least 50, 60,000 people because there would have been no chance for anybody to get out. But it didn't work, fortunately, although it pushed smoke up through the entire two structures. And killed about 12 people, but and injured about 3,000 from smoke inhalation. But anyway, there was a consideration about should Holzer was asking me should I leave New York? We get this feeling that there might be a nuclear attack or something like that, some nuclear terrorist attack or something, and I just got very quiet and I just got into that space that I get into to do these things, and I just said my voice changed and I said no. You won't have to leave New York, but don't ever go down to the Battery Financial District. Those two towers are doomed. And it was a feeling that I had been feeling when I was there, and then later in 1998 when I came to New York for another book tour, is that I'm not somebody who usually gets these kind of forebodings, but as soon as you're flying hundreds of miles in the air and you see the first things you see are those two towers at the end of a long angular mountain range of what Nostradamus would call hollow mountains. And the way those two just soared above all the other towers, rather kind of like a hit me, arrogant American, here's our fork-tailed financial god right here. And there was always something of an obscenity about the architecture of those two towers. And I'm glad the new tower actually is quite aesthetic and beautiful.
It is. That's true. Yeah, it is actually.
It's
Yeah.
because those towers always felt dark and ugly to me. They always had something of death about them, and I guess that's an aspect of the premonitions that were coming up more and more in me until finally I had a really powerful premonition that about the day before, where it was so strong that I told everybody to leave my house, told my girlfriend to leave, everything. He said, I've got to be alone to face this mystery. I don't know what's about to happen. I don't even know if it's about my own death. But I have to be alone. And and then the next morning, I was 4 hours of fitful sleep later, I was hearing this Australian voice in my dreams calling me by my Sanskrit name, because I'm a disciple of Osho. He was saying, Arjuna, Arjuna, you got to get up, mate. You got to get up. It's happening. And I just turn over in my bed and I hear it again. And this person's talking about the terror attacks in New York are happening. The towers are coming down. And finally, the third time I opened my eyes and I realized it was my agent's voice, Ron Tanner from Adelaide. He's in England, in London, and he's calling me from London. And because I have a pretty thin wall between my bedroom and my home office, I was hearing the phone and I was hearing him. And so I sprung out of bed, ran into the office, picked up the phone, said, "What's happened?" And he says, the stuff you've been writing about all these years, attack on the two towers, attack on the south end of New York, it's going on, hijacked jets. And so I run out into the living room, turn the TV on just in time to see the south tower hit by the second jet and the huge fireball that came from it.
What did that feel like, that moment for you?
It is, I am often, I would say dubiously, correct in my forecasts. And it's a strange feeling of awe, humility, and sadness, because so many of the things I foresee are negative. Because the problem is that prophecy is, in my experience, a, a fed by the predictability of people who are brought into this world by their societies and then trained to become drones and mediocrities, and to not live to their full potentials of love and meditation and consciousness. And so, but that makes them malleable to certain powers that are overlords who would prefer us overwhelmed and limited. And so that vast mass mob mind is actually very predictable. It has patterns. It's mechanical. It's robotic, like what Gurdjieff would call people very robotic, like machines. Machines are predictable. They have algorithms. And when human beings who could have been Buddhas or Christs are turned into drone-like machines of ego and separation and division, it is actually, when you have an aptitude to feel it, to psychically understand it, you can anticipate much of the repetition of the past in the future.
Well, that's very true what you say there. We are in that age where, we want to be told what to think, what to say, what to do. And there is an enlightenment going on. I mean, you'll know that, you'll see that as well, that people, from the years of the late 80s when you started this work, you would have seen a massive shift in consciousness in the sense of all these subjects being discussed, of these type of new online shows that are coming online all the time. There is a shift in people's thirst for this subject. So there is a change, and I think there is a more positive future. But you are right that a lot of the prophecy can be quite negative in one respect, but maybe that's also the shift that we need to get us out of this space.
Well, the other thing too is about the consciousness movement. First off, my experience is that there's no such thing as collective consciousness. That is a collective change and transformation. You never see in history an army of Buddhas. You never see an army of Christs or Zarathustra's. They always come alone off the mountain or out of the wilderness alone, or they come out of the Bodhi trees where they've been sitting alone. And so consciousness, now that doesn't mean that a lot of people cannot be alone together in consciousness. And there's certainly the possibility that if a certain number of people become enlightened in the world, different various numbers from 200 to 10, more than usual, that it can kind of change the unconscious, the 7 chakras of the collective human race. You might move up another chakra, and the whole human race might be in a milieu, a climate where it's still the ratio of seed potential souls to flowering are vastly different, just like in nature. I just walked under a tree that literally covered the sidewalk with an inch of seeds, and I realized if this maple tree had all these seeds become trees, it would cover my entire island. So existence is very generous in what it gives as potential, but very, very few achieve this potential. And I would even say, in my experience of looking at the New Age movement and all, is that the vast majority of people who think consciousness has lifted are just thinking about it. They're not actually lifting their consciousness.
No, that's very true. I meet and interview a lot of the people in this field in consciousness, and I would say that unfortunately, there's the people behind them as well, which are very unconscious, and I just switched off. Really switched off. I mean, they're around these teachers that are spreading, great ideas, yet the people around them don't really get it. And this is, just talking about the staff members, for example. And some of the spiritual teachers as well act one way in person, like we are now, but off camera, they're completely different. And they suffer from the same issues. So you're very right what you say. There are very few and far between that have made the transition to living living that life as well as being it, and not just talking about it. So that is true. But Yeah, well, maybe you would agree on this then, that you can't change the political system, you can't change the world, but you can change yourself. And if you can
It's the
come
only
from
thing you can
more of a loving
change.
aspect to yourself and others, that's the change that the world's looking for, is it not?
Yes, that the problem always is that solutions are always sought outside of the problem, which is you, me, the self that is unaware of itself, unaware that ultimately it could be the universe itself. And just in this wave on the surface that's Kevin, this other wave that's on the surface that's John, of a vast ocean of consciousness. And by the shapes of dream, the waves rise and fall. And even our houses, our cities, our civilizations are really an infinite number of waves of interactions in the appearance of matter, like waves that are not real in themselves. They're just shaped by the wind and the currents to appear as if they are something, but they're not. They're just the ocean. And yet they play. So just like in life here. So in one way, nothing has changed, and in another way, everything is potentially going to change. In that it's still a question of finding an authentic teacher, which is very rare. They are probably in the century, you can count them on one hand, the real teachers. Now, and then it requires the teacher is just a provocation or a glimpse into what you must do or what you must step out of the way of to allow. And that and what happens is that in a lot of the movements, I mean, I was at the Conscious Life Expo in the LA airport, and I did that back in 2012. And I was. It's interesting when you're on a panel, you can really observe the audience and see where they're at, where all the individuals are at. Their auras, their vibes are right there. Excuse me. The so it was my turn to be asked this question, and I was kind of asked the question by somebody who said, well, can you see how things have really improved, how there's so much more consciousness, and how, we're just on the verge of a great breakthrough and awakening. I'm sure you can see it here in this room and all of that. And I looked, and then what came from when I respond, even now, I don't think it just flows out of me like breathing or heartbeat. I respond to you. And I respond to my readers or to the world when I write as well. So um, this man was saying this, and then I said, and I'm also learning and listening to this voice coming out of me saying it. It was saying, I'm not so sure. I would say that the danger is that you're farther away from attaining to this consciousness because you think you've arrived. And also, I'm not hearing the kind of things that would tell me that you're awakening, rather than be so spiritually conceited about how wonderful your consciousness is growing and how much great consciousness is growing in this gathering. I think if I heard you say, I'm becoming aware of what a robot I am. I'm becoming aware of how I seem to be a collection of borrowed ideas. Even my emotions are not my own. I can look back and see the moment when a certain feeling would push my buttons or hurt my feelings. And I realized that even that was conditioned into me by somebody else, that I seem to have been an empty page that people wrote their garbage on. And I'm seeing that the whole world is a world full of people who are sleepwalking, dreaming that they are awake, confident in their consciousness, even though a lot of them are just seeds of soul. They haven't even flowered, and their soul will never really manifest. And then if the people in the audience were also feeling, if I could have feel them also nodding, and not just nodding, but their auras changed to show that they really understand that, then I would say, yes, it's true. Consciousness is lifting because you're all starting to see who you are and who you are not. And that's the first step. Very important. And so when that is seen, then I can say yes. Because the other thing I can say to you is that we are, according to the prophecies, we have just entered a second Cold War back in 2014. And we have a media now that in America especially is completely compromised by corporate interests. Even now, Time Warner is trying to buy another big hunk of something and reduce the people who own all the media outlets from six to five. And, and yes, so I'm simply say I'll finish my point. Is that while a lot of people are thinking things are getting better, what I see is the approach of fascism coming back again in corporate guise. I see United States leaders, NATO leaders, completely driven by ideology to push Russia into a corner that Russia needs not be pushed into with the belief that they can go to war with Russia in Syria. The next president, Hillary Clinton, is going to be putting up no-fly zones. You can see where that will go. And there's a countdown in Nostradamus which talks about 3 years and 7 months or 13 years. The great brothers of the North, the Eagle Kings, they both have eagles as their totem. Russia, the two-headed; America, the bald eagle, will go to war. And so if the Cold War, which started again in April of 2014 with the sanctions that were salvos of sanctions between the Russian Federation and NATO over Ukraine and Crimea, um, that means that November of next year we will see again the karmic echo of a Cuban Missile Crisis. Only they always come in negative photo form. They always come opposite as they came before. And this time around, the Russian leader plays Kennedy, and the hothead who gets everybody in a mess and sends this thing into motion is Clinton playing Khrushchev. So, so my point, and I'll finish now, is that thank you for allowing me to. It's a complicated issue. So when I see this is just around the corner where we could actually destroy the world next November, I am saying for the sake of consciousness, and that's I guess why I do what I do and upset a lot of apple carts, that this consciousness that everybody thinks is coming is mostly just in their imagination, and that the focus should not be on whether a whole bunch of people get conscious, like in the 2012 hysteria, but you. It's all about you getting conscious. And if millions of people all over the world hear that message that all of you use, then something is possible, and then it could be a vast change.
That's right. Now that I completely agree with in this moment right now. I think you've touched on that I think you were thinking this way. Listen to that Art Bell interview many years ago. You was experimenting with how powerful you was as an individual, from what I remember in that interview, in the sense of that space of I can't change anything except for myself. Even way back then, you were looking at that.
My understanding of the future and prophecy, I'm probably unique in the field, is that I see it from the point of being on the path of the science of self-observation. As I said, I took sannyas in India in 1980 from Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, who's also known as Osho. And so since 1980, I have been on the path of self-observation. One finds that by looking inside the human psyche, of your own human psyche, you don't have to go very deep to find out that you are basically a microcosm of everybody else. And out of that comes a compassion when you realize that you're just as in the dark as everybody else, and also just as potentially any moment from now able to understand the all. So, so, so that is the open secret of why I do how I do what I do, looking at the world's future. So yes, it's been there a long time.
You're an interesting man. I knew you was going to be, but you're a lot more deeper than even I foresaw. This is so interesting. Okay, and we're going to get into all the juicy stuff as well for anyone staying with us to this point, because this I wanted to get your background story as well. We're going to get into that. It's very important what you've just spoken about as well. The solution. If you're looking for a teacher, the teacher was you all the way along. Any teacher that comes along in your life is there just to remind you of that, really, to give you the self-empowerment back, not for you to be, aghast and looking up to them and holding on to every word they say forever. It's for you to remember the love within inside that you've got to give to yourself and other people. Okay, and if there's anything you disagree with what I'm saying, please just say so. I mean,
Well,
this isn't my truth show. This is everyone's.
well, Kevin, that's exactly my experience of Osho. I knew him. I was even a bodyguard in his household, so I also saw him in his life, in his regular life, like you were talking about, as well as the public person. And he wasn't he wasn't different. He was a constant. The thing that was so amazing about him was that he'd come walking out to his car to be driven to the where everybody met him in the ashram. And then he'd come back, and usually I was a guard at the driveway position, a fly on the wall, if you will, in the jungle bushes looking. And so I saw a lot of amazing things. I saw how he could be talking and interacting, and also was absolutely alone. He was in aloneness incarnate, and but it was not a negative thing. It was not a positive thing. It was something else. It was something that's very hard for the mind to understand because it's not dual. It's both this and that and something else. And he was a friend to us. He was a fellow traveler and a friend. Actually, he did much in his writings and in his teachings to break the whole tradition of the looking up at the master as some god. In a way, what he created in his movement is a break from that past. He was the embodiment of the concept that Buddha in his distant prophecies said, is that when I come again, or someone like me comes, they will simply be your friend, Maitreya. And he was just our friend. And he was on the path. He was an ordinary man. Unlike other people, when he got burned, he didn't get his body encased in a tomb and a samadhi without being burned like a lot of Hindu or Jain sages. He was his own sage. He wasn't any of those things. When we were saying, well, what do you want to do? Oh, just put me in the main hall for 10 minutes and take me to the burning ghats. But remember to put on my shoes. So, and when it was time for him to go and his heart was failing, he said, his doctor said, Osho, I think this is it. And he went, mm-hmm, like that, closed his eyes. And when we took him down to the Ghats, and I was on the guard detail for that, I really understand that Zen story about the disciples not sure they want to burn their master because he looks so radiant and alive, even though he just, I guess, died, but he's luminous. Like a subtle light is glowing, like his colors of his clothes and his skin are just more than us. And it's weird. And then so I was feeling the same. Is he really dead? He's just laying here. And then Amrito, the doctor, got a little too excited with it when we're dancing and singing. And then Osho's neck went like that. So I realized, okay, he's not there anymore. So good. We're not going to be burning our master alive. And
yeah. Okay. Well, look. I want to ask you. There's a number of questions I've got. I really want to get into as well, and I really appreciate the backstory there as well. Thank you for just sharing what you have done. Also, what got you into Nostradamus as well? Very briefly, why Nostradamus? Out of anything you could have done, because I believe that you had a daytime job back in the day, in the sense, and you switched to this reality. What really got you into it?
Well, it was when I was in middle school. The first thing that happened, I was trying to doze off in an afternoon with a documentary was being played, and excuse me, um, the documentary was called The Crooked Cross, and it started off with a rather poetic beginning, which showed the footage of the Hitler Youth marching with their torches and burning all the books in that huge funerary pyre in the university with Goebbels standing there, the propaganda minister. Very famous, iconic shot. And the voiceover was over 400 years ago, a man named Nostradamus. And when I heard that name, I immediately sprung up in my chair and stood up, sat up straight, and looked at the picture. It was so involuntary, strange experience. And the thought I had was, that is the strangest name I have ever heard in my life. But there was also an incredible, like it was almost like a call from the past. It was almost like a a, a a recognition of something mysterious that I should take note of. And then he said, you know, he foresaw a time where the German child would know no law and follow a man named Hister and his crooked cross. And these are the prophecies of Nostradamus. Hister was the anagram for Hitler, was with a Gothic S, so it had a T in it. Or actually, from the camera, I should do it that way. And it helps to be dyslexic to do that. But
I'm dyslexic as well. Don't worry about that. That's interesting. Have you ever considered that? I mean, and this is maybe going to sound a bit strange, but have you ever considered that in a past life you may have had a connection with Nostradamus?
I am definitely connected to him from the work I'm doing. I can say that. I'm connected to the same source. But I see that in many people who are total in what they do. For instance, Daniil Trifonov, the young new pianist from Russia, who he literally becomes Franz Liszt when he plays Liszt's transcendental etudes. He becomes Schumann. He literally, when he does Rachmaninoff, I'm going, wow, you know, it's like he's channeling Rachmaninoff. So one thing I can say yes to in public, and that is that I am definitely tuned in to the same source.
To the same source. Okay, yeah, because you mentioned in this interview as well that you I'm personifying your words there, that you had the feeling over you that this was true, that this was going to happen, that the Twin Towers were doomed in a sense. There was, or when you were speaking to Hans, you were saying that something came through you. What is that source that comes through you that is not of your words, but yet you're allowing it to not filter it in a sense, and you're saying it's the same source as maybe what Nostradamus and other seers I tapped into?
It is the potential of all of us. It is the potential of all of us if we begin to remember that and I don't mean this as a picture of a rice cake, because this is the great trap. So many New Age people, really good people, get caught in what the Zen mystics would call the picture of a rice cake. And they take the parchment and the ink and they try to eat it and get nourishment like it's a real rice cake. You can picture with your mind the great concepts of truth. And most people stop there. You have to feel it with your whole hog, as Gurdjieff would say. You have to feel it with all of your centers. You have to feel it mind, body, spirit. And there's a certain knack to that. That meditation helps one prepare the way for the guest to come, that guest of that mystery. And the guest is the whole existence. All of us are destined, if we become more conscious, to, in our unique ways, just like the forms have unique forms, of expressing the will of the whole existence. I do it through singing and music and telling prophecies and stories. Another person may do it by just fetching wood and carrying water. There are great lotuses and there are clover flowers, and they're all connected to the same thing. So there's no comparison.
But then
because
Donald Trump could be doing it when he's doing a business deal.
Donald Trump, I wrote a book about him
I know.
when it started. I was one of the few people that was out there saying, "Look, he's serious. He's probably the only person that will make me wrong this time around on my 13th try in 48 years of picking the president who will win the American presidency. I've done it 12-0 since 1968, and I've been telling people Trump. And back in summer of last year, when everybody thought he was not, he was just a joke. He was just doing an ad for the next Celebrity Apprentice. Even his own producers thought that. But no, I looked at his astrology, and well, also what I found in Trump was quite shocking and surprising that there is a there that I was not expecting to find. The problem is that the Trump that we see is he is a natural born medium. He's a natural born channeler, but he has no awareness of what he channels. So I could tell you stories about intimate interactions between him and other people in private situations where he's absolutely caring, humble, really there for them. And yet, when he's in front of a mass mob, he channels the mob psychosis. And that's so it's no wonder and in a way it's half in compassion. He's able to feel and be the catalyst for the personal catalyst for the catharsis of a country. And what he's saying is right. A lot of people are upset in this country. We are probably 4 years away from a revolution in this country. I hope it's peaceful, but it's very close. And he is making voice to it, but he is also channeling the unconsciousness of the masses.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
and that's why, and he's trapped.
Yeah, and that's why as well he's been a master manifester in a lot of respects, unbeknown to him. If you look at it from the law of attraction's point of view as well, you can just see that. But a lot of people with that gift are completely unaware that that's what they're doing. They're switched off to their own arsehole in a sense, right? They have no. It's maybe this type of information is not supposed to come their way. Maybe they're supposed to be benevolent to what's really going on so that they can make the biggest impact to all the lives that they affect around them. Who knows?
Well, it's like the famous quote, I make my decisions walking with the certitude of a sleepwalker. Adolf Hitler, who was also a great medium, but profoundly unconscious. And so he channeled huge forces. He manifested, he's unique in history, actually, for what he manifested. Not very nice what he did, but it is really the ultimate unconscious channel. Now, Donald Trump doesn't have that in his chart. That had to come up to be asked because people are trying to say he's an antichrist or he's the character from The Dead Zone by Stephen King. Greg Stilson, the man running for Senate, the man with the power to through psychokinetic touches his hand by accident in a rally and sees a dozen years later that he's a president of the United States and starts World War III.
Okay.
So
sure, go ahead. You finish. Yeah, sorry.
It's very life. He is Eros. He's not Tathanos. He's love and life. He's not death. He doesn't serve death. I'm a little more concerned about Clinton serving death, though.
Yeah, and we're gonna get into this as well. We are literally on the doorstep of getting into this. We're 46 minutes in. I thought we could do this in 51 minutes.
Let's keep going.
Let's keep going. Okay. No, thank you for giving us your time to do this. That's all I'm going to say. I appreciate that. Okay. Now, just when you mentioned Teller and other people that have challenged you before, Randy as well. Let's just make one thing clear that these prophecies were basically wrapped up in code and all sorts of other things. They at the time when, as a physician, Nostradamus was alive, had he come out and with this gift as clear as we're discussing prophecies right now, he would have been burnt or otherwise. And also, I'm guessing as well from reading some of your books that he did not want to reveal exact names or places or dates exactly because it would give rise to then having those future timelines altered in some way.
Yes, because he actually foresaw that he would be used as propaganda tools in both world wars. There's descriptions in one of the prophecies about the bird, this bird which is a plane dropping leaflets over the French. I mean, he is the man that said a great empire would fall through the Suvan d'Ardennes, the Ardennes forest. Um, and it's dated Century, Volume 5, Quatrain 45, the fifth month of 1945, when indeed two empires fell. The French colonial empire was broken and fell because of 1940 invasion of the Germans through the Ardennes forest. And then the Axis empire fell of Adolf Hitler when he tried to throw his last strategic reserves into the Battle of the Bulge, also through the Ardennes in late 44, early 45. So, and then here's the end of the theater of operations in Europe was May of 1945, 545. Now, unfortunately, there's a trap in that. And back to the subject of dyslexia, Nostradamus was a profound dyslexic. And I understand him because I'm also dyslexic, and it does give you an ability to see things backwards, come through many other stages of your brain to the same conclusion, and that actually is not a detriment. That is a great aid in understanding Nostradamus's prophecies. Um, the it's true that he had to coax them in, and he said that he made a decision to play the charlatan, and he said I'd probably be called a charlatan for doing it this way, but he had to do it because of the special sensitivities of people who, if they could see how vastly changed their future would be, their religions, their hopes, their politics, and all that, they would damn their own future. And so he felt a responsibility to that. And consider if he had, I mean, he came pretty close to calling Hitler Hitler outright. Um, and, he named him after the ancient name of the river Danube where Hitler grew up. And so, uh, but it's a dangerous game because if you, for instance, if maybe he was more clearer about Saddam Hussein, Saddam Hussein would have seen that, oh, maybe I shouldn't attack Kuwait. Maybe I should wait until I have nuclear missiles that I throw on Tel Aviv in 5 years, because he was so. And then who would be responsible for that?
Well,
Nostradamus.
let's just point this out as well, that when I listened back to that old Art Bell interview, something interesting about the Y2K predictions. Obviously, you mentioned on there about some power outages or issues affecting Y2K, and some of the millennials will not even know what we're talking about here, right? But this, somewhat my point is, not everything comes true. Time is not set, is it? There is free will in there as well.
The one thing, the most important message that can be learned from a deep study of Nostradamus is that he was a firm actuator of multiple futures. You see a number of quatrains that look like they're on the right track, and then the last step is wrong. There's one, for instance, where he describes through geographic references the advance and expansion of Hitler before World War II. And everything is correct about Austria, about the Anschluss, about going into France and taking Paris and all of that, but he added Switzerland to it. And I thought, okay, well, that didn't happen. Switzerland didn't join in the Anschluss. And so, but rather than do what I was seeing other scholars do, where they said, well, that just means he was wrong. I said, no, wait a minute. Yeah, it could be. But is there another possibility? The possibility may be, maybe it was something that could have happened. Is there any indication that that is so? So I studied it, and I found that during the time of the late 30s, there was a serious Nazi Party movement in the German cantons of Switzerland. They had 90,000 members, and 70 to 90,000 members, and there was open discussion about breaking up the Swiss Union and seeing the German cantons go to Hitler. So it was in play, it just didn't happen. The other thing is you never see a mention really of the Normandy landings in Nostradamus. But what you do see is a very detailed mention of the August 44 invasion up through his homeland of Provence. Almost, it's breathtaking how many of the maneuvers that actually happen are described in that. Um, and what then happens is that the Allies go up the Rhone Valley and they meet the Russians on the Rhine. Now, if Normandy had failed, it's very likely that the Russians steamroller would have gone over Berlin and gone all the way to the Rhine. Because if we had to fight from that long distance away with far from logistics, because Normandy failed. So there's a potential that didn't happen. So the most important message is two things that cause people to pull their hair out about me. And there's another thing that's really the lesson of prophecy. First, the hair pullers. There is a mindset that's been programmed by most religions, organized religions, to say that the future is written in stone. The reality that I encounter and is evidenced in the alternative futures that are even in Nostradamus' prophecies, most famous being either the king of his time dies in a jousting accident, or he becomes the second Charlemagne of France. Same king. And they can't both happen. He died of a jousting accident, which negates the Charlemagne. So the future is not written in stone. It's a dynamic echo to the present, which is also alive, and the actions that we do. We make it appear to be written in stone by our predictability and our mediocrity and our dronishness.
Okay then. But anything we're going to mention in the not too distant future here right now about about America as well and the presidency, is the same applied to that then? Is the same applied to a lot of the future predictions as well? That it's, there could be some alternative timelines here, but then you would also, in the predictions that we're going to talk about, you would also say you've used your connection, your intuitive side to really feel whether these, these are going to happen or not. There's also that side of you that's connected as well, that's sort of filtering this.
Well, yeah, that is that if the human race was, if all the children were allowed to mature into fully awakened, intelligent beings, the prophecy business would be over, because intelligence is spontaneous. It's very unpredictable. What almost seems a sure bet, but even in a sure bet, and this is what pulls the hair out of a lot of my critics, I will say in as early as year 2000, Hillary Clinton is not going to only be a New York senator, but she's going to be the first woman president of the United States. As I started saying that back, I think it was in Coast to Coast, an Ian Punnett show. It's the first said it November of 2000. But in early March of 2007, and I also said she would be president in 2008. Well, in 2007, I started seeing something that could make a weak link to that certain certitude. And so as a prophecy scholar, because things are not written in stone, I not only talk about what I think predict is going to happen, but I also look at what would make that wrong. And people think that's hedging bets because they're thinking from the mindset of it's already there, it's already preordained. How can there be any possibility of this or that? So I started talking about in an article called Hillary Clinton's Albatross, where I used the rhyme of the ancient sea mariner as a metaphor for her albatross that she had hung over, that she shot and killed and had hung over her neck, was her vote in favor of going to war in Iraq. One of her major foreign policy decisions, which haunts her to this day, is that against all advice and against all the huge amount of intelligence that was coming in from Franz Blix of the UN and others to show that there really wasn't a reason to invade Iraq, that there probably wasn't anything there. She went with the war fever because she wanted to look tough, wanted to look more like a man than the other men that she was fighting for power against, which is one of her faults. She went with that blindly within the 2 hours of the debate, and then when it came to the time of the I saw that when the primaries would start in less than a year later, in 2007 and 2008, I said, she's going to go up against the war lobby in her party, and it's going to be a very tight primary race against Barack Obama, who is outright against the war, called it a dumb war. And this is how she'll lose. If she loses, she'll lose because she cannot apologize for her role in causing the war, her responsibility. And that's exactly what happened. What I then said is, but I still feel president in her future. I still feel that the door is not closed. I felt with Obama that if he became president in 2008, that he would come to his destiny too soon, not ready for the job, and that would make a potentially great president a disappointment. And that has actually happened. You can come too soon to your destiny or too late. So the question then is, was that Hillary Clinton's window, and had she missed it? Would she be coming too late in 2016? And actually, no. I had seen for the following 8 years and wrote and confirmed it and spoke on radio saying, no, she will be the next president of the United States in 2016. However, again, the other weak link. The weak link is her predilection to bad strategic choices and scandals and health issue. I said a health issue with her head was very possibly a problem. And I still say she has some cardiovascular issues that will, in either case of a Trump presidency or a Clinton presidency, I do not see either one of them finishing their first term for a number of reasons. One is health issues for Hillary Clinton, but also this issue with the Clinton Foundation is not going away. It is going to haunt her throughout this whole thing because it is vast, the amount of favoritism that is going on, and it's documented. And even though the media right now is totally in her pocket, to the point where I've even watched them, she's answering questions. One of her aides is typing something into his phone and then showing it to one of the major interviewers who's not, while she's talking. And then the interviewer goes, yes, and then says the question, and he's smiling, happy that. So this is the press of our day. They're literally being told what to ask rather than ask hold the people to the fire there with the truth. And in this day and age, if you did that 20 years ago, that's the end of your career. That would be it. But in this day and age, there is no journalism in America. That's why everybody is getting so upset about Russia today. And it's gaining a lot of audience because Russia today is, and I've been vetting them now for 3 years of watching them and checking what they do and what their facts are. And beyond where they openly say, yes, we're giving you a Russian view of the world, that's not hidden. They're not like the American press saying, oh, no, we're giving you the truth. No, it's an American point of view. They're so accurate in what they're saying that I imagine that Hillary Clinton will find a way to shut them down.
Well, it's funny you say that. The bank accounts for Russia Today in the UK have just been pulled from a bank called NatWest in the UK, and they're now having to look for alternative banks in a month's time. Well, they'll be looking now, they will. And it's little signs like this that are, kept away from the public as small news, but they're massive implications, really, of what's really going on in the background.
So that's why I'm saying, history comes in cycles. And earlier on, I was saying that we are now approaching again the repeat of what Strauss and Howe, the great futurologists, had said is the fourth turning. This is a fourth 20-year period, an 80-year cycle that basically we're repeating. Where we are right now is where we were in the late 30s, 1930s.
Well, yes, because you talk about as well the Great Depression of 2016 in one of your newest books as well, which was interesting.
Yes, and now I'm writing. I've no longer. 2015, 2016 is a new idea I have where I don't do annual prophecy books anymore every year. I found that it's better to do it in 24-month installments with a short one of 10 major predictions by each annum. But not so now I'm doing one called Predictions 2017-2018, Years of Crisis and Breakthrough. that is looking at what I call it the depression's antidepressant. Basically, it's being postponed by the fiat economy finding some way. I mean, here's the steps, basically, in a nutshell. The steps are this: 2008, the central banks had to um, save the economies of the world that overspent. In 2017, 2018, the IMF will come in and save the central banks. In 2021, the entire fiat system will collapse. Finally, the bill will have to be paid. The bonds will run out. And this is actually a prophecy in Nostradamus, dated with the astrological datings that show it to be around the year 2021, which would make sense because once the IMF has used its $50 trillion base to save the banks, do a bail-in, everybody takes a haircut and then they save the banks. That's it. There's nowhere else to keep this illusion of floating currencies without a tangible wealth going. And that is why so many of the countries are, China especially, and Russia and others are grabbing or creating as much gold as possible. So that's one big thing that's coming. The other big thing, of course, is the fact that we may run into a threat of nuclear war at the end of a year from now. And hopefully we'll survive that. But in either case, by 2018, I look at Hillary Clinton's astrology and other things involved, and I just see that she will leave office either with through all three blows: economic crisis, ruining her reputation as a leader, her health fails because also the scandals start coming up again, and then she leaves office on account of health.
And then Trump as well would be possibly impeached in his term as well. I think that's what's in your book.
Yeah, I saw that Trump went, if he got into office, and there's still a chance. I just noticed that it's the difference in the popular vote across nationally is tightening, and I've said that this is going to be very close. It could be a repeat of the year 2000. That you might actually see one of them again winning the electoral college and the other winning the popular vote, and so. But if Trump wins in that dispute, Trump will probably very quickly declare himself what he always has been politically, an independent. He will become that third party, taking a third of the U.S. government into his own power because he's fed up with the Republicans for how they've abandoned him, and there will be blood for that. And so he finds himself as the loner, and the ultimate narcissistic loner will be a party unto himself. And he will feel that he could really, and in some ways he does, channel the real. There's a lot more truth coming out of Trump's loud mouth than I've seen coming out of Hillary Clinton's mouth.
In some respects, yes, you're right. Definitely, yeah.
It's not eloquent. It's not. It's an 8-year-old's English. He's got the innocence of a brash child, which I think.
Honest though, that's yeah.
It might be an ugly honesty sometimes, but this is the guy. He's an authentic man, even warts and all.
Well, can you imagine if he wins, right? And Hillary is going to be left out to hung because you can imagine then the news will take seriously the WikiLeaks disclosures, and that will become the main news then. And also Donald has already said he will be he will be filing legal action against her for that. I mean, it's a mess either way. Sorry, you can continue with what you were going to say.
Yeah. The problem for Trump is that if he declares himself an independent, Pence, his vice president, will leave because he is a true blue Republican and has aspirations to be president. So he will resign. And I have this funny feeling that Jesse Ventura, who's another independent, a successful independent who ran Minnesota for 4 years as governor, could end up being his vice president. And when I said that on Coast to Coast to George Noory, George, the host, is saying, we just had Jesse on last week, and he also thinks that might happen. So I went, wow, that's interesting. But what will happen then is that the corporations have taken since 2010. Americans still don't get this yet. They're going to slowly come around to it, but America is ever the sleeping giant. It needs a Pearl Harbor event for Americans to wake up as a collective body. They're starting to. They're flopping around in bed, swatting at the buzzing fly at their nose. But one of these days, they're going to wake up to the fact that they lost their republic in January 2010 when the Supreme Court decided in favor of Citizens United and literally opened up the floodgates to corporations being equal to people, and therefore you cannot prove their quid pro quo. So they can flood as much money and influence into the elections, and multinationally too. I mean, this is the thing that's shocking. This is even against the Constitution that there should be any foreign. It's in the swearing of the Constitution of serving that any foreign elements influences. But this opens the gate wide to any country who wants to fix the elections is trying to fix the U.S. elections. So those people, the Democrats and Republicans, are just a two-faced chimera of the same problem. They are two storefronts of the same shop, and it's corporate. They will come together in a beautiful bipartisan effort to throw Trump out, and he won't even last the year.
No. So who would you? I mean, okay then. Who are if you as a betting man, which some people have placed bets on your outcomes and on your predictions, sorry, and they've been the right outcome. Who are you going to go with?
I've always said Hillary Clinton for 16 years now. I've been saying it. I say that she will probably win within 2% of the popular vote. I do these predictions by popular vote. That's why I had the odd prediction for the year 2000, where I got on national shows like Jeff Rentz and others and said, I am absolutely certain Al Gore is going to win by 500,000 votes to become the next president of the United States, and I also get the message that I'm going to be absolutely wrong at the same time. That was my prediction. So the prediction was true. He did win by 500,000 votes, but the Republican districts, they would have found in a statewide recount that there was over 20,000 votes that were not counted right. So Al Gore won. It was stolen, uh, and a bastard president was put in rather than legitimate. But with him, even back then, I was talking about what would the two potential presidencies would be like. I saw Al Gore actually dying in office of a heart problem if he had been there. That didn't happen because he wasn't in the office. But I said if Bush wins this recount trial thing, within 2 years of his first term, he'll get us into a major war in the Middle East on the ground because of some terrorist event. And it will most likely be Iraq, and he will overthrow Saddam Hussein quite easily, but get America into a new Vietnam in the desert, a quagmire. It's all written down and all spoken, and I said it in November of 2000.
It is.
And
it's a funny thing. You're talking about Clinton winning there as well, and about the potential war with Russia. When you look at news feeds like Russia Today right now, you'll see Vladimir Putin being interviewed, and it's all very calm on the outside, on the exterior. There's no talk about war. There's just talk about reconciliation, about bonding, about making the planet a better place. Yet, elsewhere in the world, England has just sent 800 troops over to the Baltic states, almost, and lots of other deployment with NATO and everything else. It's almost like, are we trying to send them a message? Do they know something we don't know? Is Hillary going to be very trigger happy? I goddamn well hope not. What is on the horizon?
She is going to be very trigger happy. It's kind of when you look at both of these two characters who are running for president, you see both of them have a specific attitude that they are in a denial of two things that can destroy the world. Trump is in denial of climate change, planetary climate change. Hillary Clinton is not, but when you look at her corporate track record, I doubt she's going to do much about climate change because she's funded by a lot of the people who would be harmed by her legislation. And just looking at the Clinton money trail for the Clinton Foundation I don't see them going against the cash cow. Uh, so one of the chief being Saudi Arabia, gave them $35 million. And then she looked the other way, changed the rules when she was Secretary of State and allowed the Saudis to gain $62 billion of weaponry that they're now using to destroy Yemen, which is hardly even talked about in this country. She scares me much more because she is, I'm right now writing a book about her. I documented it. I started it 21 days before the elections. It's called The President Hillary Clinton Prophecies. And it will be out sometime later in November. It'll certainly be out before January 20th when she officially becomes president. But she's very scary to me because she is a focal point of all this collective hysteria and ideologically driven point of view of leaders, that Russia is somehow the Soviet Union, that Russia is somehow in some replay of that. And that comes from the fact that what really sustains the American economy, the last thing that really sustains it, is that we are the biggest military producer in the world. Our military industrial complex had arisen as an addiction after World War II because World War II seamlessly moved into the Cold War for 45 years, which required a military readiness. But it became a business. Containment, some people made trillions of dollars doing that over the last 45 or so years. And so when it ended and peace began to happen and the brothers of the North began to reconcile, the warmongers were in a depression because it's like, how do we sustain this thing? We need another Cold War. So they started searching for one. And in my book, A New Cold War, The Prophecies of Nostradamus, Stormberger, and Edgar Cayce, where I look at these countdowns about the war, they were trying. I tell the long tale about how they first tried the war on terror. As soon as it happened, the towers had scarcely fallen, and George Bush is already talking about a 30-year war against terrorism. Where does this 30 years come in? He doesn't know. That's a projection. That's propagating. We're going to keep this containment thing going and going. So that didn't really work because the terrorists were not so controllable. It's kind of on the side. But then now, since early 2014, the idea is go back to the old business model, turn Russia into, because Russia, you look at all the countries that America destroys, like them or hate them, they're all stand up for their sovereignty. They don't, when America says you're going to do it this way, and they say, no, we got our own way of doing it. And if they even then start talking about getting off the U.S. petrodollar, they go down. Gaddafi, Assad, next, Iraq, Saddam, the Ayatollah, Khamenei. They have one thing in common. They all are talking about getting off petrodollars and getting out of the U.S. hegemonic economic situation. And so the neoconservative movement started being born right after that. And in one of my books, Nostradamus, The War with Iran, Islamic Prophecies of the Apocalypse, I take everyone through the evolution, through their own manifestos of the neoconservative movement. And it's very clear that and I have tapes of Wesley Clark, the general, actually admitting things that he saw when he came to visit the Pentagon a week or two after the 9/11. And clearly they already had an agenda to take down 7 countries, and they were all countries that were, like them or not, were not going to play games with the Americans and just say, when America says jump, they say how high. And so my country has been destroying nations. And then what they're creating is stable areas where ISIS has arisen. ISIS is created by the Iraqi invasion. The terrorists, jihadists, were not in the heartland of the Arab world until George Bush literally invited them. Bring it on. He said, "Yeah, come fight me here in Iraq." And they said, I remember seeing some of their tapes. And we have, Mr. President Bush, we have heard you, and we are here. And they created Al Qaeda in Iraq. And Al Qaeda in Iraq is the Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, whose name also translates as the third Antichrist, was the father of ISIS. His group, and he was destroyed. But out of his group, one of the people who were one of the clerics that ran prayers during their meetings is al-Baghdadi, the head of ISIS today. He is also a candidate for the third Antichrist. But then so is Obama, whose name also translates into Mabas, and so is George W. Bush. And just because it says Mabas soon dies, and then there's a terrible destruction of people and animals in the prophecy of Mabas, it doesn't specify that he's still in power. He could be a retired president that soon dies from the consequences of something that unleashes a destruction of humanity and animal kingdom. That's the great threat. And there's two ways it comes. And both these presidents are blind to one or the other way.
Where does that leave North Korea then as well? There's a country that's that's just tipping to want to, use its nuclear arsenal, if it has it even. Are they involved in some great...
No, actually, I mean, they play a very interesting game. Sort of the thing that's going to take down North Korea is going to be food. It's going to be an interior collapse. And when that happens, the Chinese army will march in as a humanitarian act to do two things: keep millions of Koreans from coming into Manchuria looking for food, and also to prevent Korea from collapsing so that U.S. bases can be on the Yalu River, right next door to China. China will never let North Korea go down. It may incorporate it into its own area as a humanitarian, quote-unquote, act. It's the same with what happened with Crimea. So few people understand what was going on. And I caught a whole lot of heat for being one of the few voices to actually show movies and footage, raw footage showing that the people who took over the Kiev government from Yanukovych, who was sympathetic to Putin's, was a neo-Nazi group. Svoboda and Right Sector are neo-Nazi parties. So there were 600 to 800 academy mercenaries. That's Blackwater, by the way. It used to be called Blackwater. Were also flown in there, and then they were starting to talk about, we're going to Ukrainianize the Eastern Russians. We'll stamp those Muscovites out. I mean, they were talking, the Kiev government, the first thing they did was to make Russian no longer one of the legal languages in statecraft in Ukraine. And these people are looking and saying, these people are going to come and attack us. And I mean, I would say the same, that if in my state of Seattle, in a state of Washington in America, if all the other states around it said, we're going to organize these guys, we're going to Idahoize these guys, and we're going to stamp them out if they don't go our way, you would see militias forming here to protect themselves. So the Eastern Russians that live and dominate the Eastern Ukraine, they started pulling out their arms, and there were lots of stockpiles. And then, of course, later on, the uniforms got cleaner and got greener, and suddenly the tanks were newer. And, of course, Vladimir Putin put in Russian tanks, because if you want to anticipate what he's going to do next, you have to understand him rather than project your idea of what he is. Vladimir Putin is a judo master, a black belt in judo. He's a Russian Orthodox Christian, although a lot of people think he's an atheist communist here. He's a Russian Orthodox Christian who has a very strong bent towards Eastern meditation and martial arts. So I even found out from Russian contacts that he often uses metaphors of judo to explain his own actions. The way you catch a stronger opponent off guard. So he saw what was going on in Ukraine. He saw that they were going to take it into NATO, and that means that the bases the Russians had in Crimea were going to be taken away. So he took Crimea back because Crimea, frankly, has never been Ukrainian. It is a Russian state for 300 years. And the fact that it did not go back to Russia when the Soviet Union collapsed, even back then I was saying, oh, that's going to probably cause World War III someday. So, this is what's going on while everybody in a dark room is thinking about how conscious they are in the Conscious Life Expo.
But then again, coming back to that as well, yeah, no, that's true. Coming back to that, if there was going to be a third world war from events, and what you're saying is it's a possibility, isn't it? That there is something in Nostradamus' predictions that there could actually be a third world war. Yeah.
Yes, it's detailed. He even describes. He talks about they will unleash dreadful globes that will turn cities on fire that are helpful to the fleet.
And you think this could be in the next 3 years, maybe, or?
Well, no, the countdown. I've always been waiting for Nostradamus in that book, Nostradamus, the New Cold War, Nostradamus prediction book. I have a whole chapter about Nostradamus's breathtaking ability to not just predict dates, but give you periods of time and describe what happens in those periods of time. And just so to get people kind of a background, and then I talk about these 2 periods of time, 3 years and 7 months or 13 years. The thing he consistently doesn't do, he doesn't give you a hint when to start counting. The message is between the lines, be aware, watch. See when it and announce it when you see it's there. So for 30 years of studying Nostradamus, I've been waiting to see anything that would be that countdown. And it finally happened when this new Cold War started in April as a reaction to Crimea and all that, and the sanctions salvos happened. We were in a Cold War with the Russians again. I started counting because that would be a significant count. When the friendship really starts souring, the attempts at friendship fail, then you're 3 years and 7 months out or 13 years out. So that means you're either November of 2017 or 2027 are the 2 windows of war. So it isn't written in stone. The reason why I'm so adamant about these things and is to scare people straight, is to make people aware, because the thing that's so dangerous right now is that there's one thread in all these prophets that predicted the First and Second World War so clearly, and they're in this book with Nostradamus. Except for one of them, they all saw the Third World War coming as a war that no one thought was there. No one thought there was any danger of it. They just walked, as Stormberger said, with their eyes wide open into these great catastrophes. And maybe he gives it in plural because he's also talking about planetary climate change. But and what I see happening with an uninformed public in America, with a news agency that's completely one-sided, they won't even report the fact that the eastern Aleppo, al-Nusra, al-Qaeda people, are consistently bombing the West. And you can see footage every day on Russia Today from all the casualties that are happening of indiscriminate bombing of civilians in Western Aleppo. So they're the only
no, it's
TV
completely biased. Yeah,
that show both.
Yeah, completely biased.
But in America, you think it was all the Russians with their barrel bombs and Syrians throwing it on these poor people in Eastern Aleppo. They're not even telling you that the al-Nusra people are holding them hostage, and that if anybody who tries to go through those zones to get out are shot down. There were 10 people shot down the other day. Yep. And they're not telling you that. And so that creates in an entire populace with half the major amount of nuclear weapons in the world, 8,500 of them, is telling them that, oh, this is the way the world is. So they walk into this thing, and even their leaders are convincing themselves of these lies. They're walking with their eyes open into this conflict. It could be something. You're talking about the 800 British troops in the Baltic states. There's something no one talks about, is that there are sizable Russian populations in the Baltic states that are not given equal citizenship and rights to the Balts. And that's an important thing the press should be bringing out, because if we resolve that issue, then what happens if the Latvians start attacking their Russian neighbors? What happens if all these Russians are suddenly being attacked for some reason? I mean, even though it's a NATO nation, is it possible the Russian army might come in to protect other Russians? I mean, that is a potential where a little Baltic state could start World War III.
Well, what did in the predictions for World War Three as a common thread? What were the common places to, to
The Middle
suffer
East.
basically from the Middle East? Yeah, to suffer
Well,
from the war.
The Middle East is the catalyst, but he talks about two-thirds of the human race being consumed by this war. He even describes the light of the great flames coming from the south and creeping northward. And I found out that the Russian and American strategic missile units have targeted, if there was a full nuclear exchange, the first cities that are wiped out are the ones south, farthest south in both cases. And then the bombs march like a carpet bombing of atomic weapons up towards the north. And he was describing that in his prophecies. When he calls it the dreadful globe, if you look at, and he'll often look inside of machines and trying to describe them in metaphors, often of animals. I mean, he described, for instance, the beast that is so impossible to tame will finally be tamed by man after great difficulties. Taking the beast that's so harmful to the rod, meaning lightning on a rod, and he will suspend it into the air, and and you hear voices and things like that. He's trying to talk about radio and telecommunications, electricity. Well, when he talks about the dreadful globes, if you look at a thermonuclear weapon when they're manufactured, it looks like a ball. The fusion fuse is a fusion bomb that perfectly surrounds a core that is a fission fuse that surrounds a core where the fusion, where the explosion imploding in on the core will create fusion. So it's actually two bombs, a fission bomb and a fusion as a trigger, and a fusion bomb as a thermonuclear event where you create a small sun as a bomb. He's describing the globe, the trigger of that. It will unleash dreadful globes with an invisible death. That radiation.
So we don't really, so we're not too sure, are we, of what parts of the world would be affected by this? As in, if we were just going to give a few countries that might suffer.
Well, I mean, it would. You have 8,500 nuclear weapons, and so in Russia, the Russian Federation, you have, if you count the NATO nuclear powers and the United States, there's also another 8,500 weapons. What you would probably be looking at is initially a conventional war in the Middle East that would then create the situation. Fortunately, a lot less bombs than we had in the 80s. That's a good thing. But still, more than we had during the Cuban Missile Crisis. And what you would have within 30 minutes is Russia and America would be completely taken out. So, but the other thing too is no one knows to the extent of certainly a lot of European cities would probably be taken out. England, France, England, anybody who has nuclear weapons would be taken out. The great killer in any nuclear scenario is the nuclear winter. How many cities pump clouds of soot and radioactive fire smoke into the atmosphere would create a disruption in the climate that would break down the agricultural industry. And I've always said that if there ever was a nuclear war, or if planetary climate change came out of control, the best chances that you would have to be killed is but through famine, and that's also in Nostradamus. So plagues, invisible plagues created by men that cover the entire northern hemisphere, and great famines that hit every corner of the world. Really scary stuff. I know it is scary, but and it is scary because the person who is going to win this election is one of the most staunchest pro-Hogue anti-Russian
Yeah,
president.
let's bring this around then. Does this have to come true? And
No.
no. And would you be surprised if it didn't?
I would be overjoyed. Like I was saying earlier, when you're accurate, two things happen to you. You're personally impacted by the fact that that most of your accuracy is about the predictions that are negative, not positive, because of the predictability of human beings, and you feel a certain deeper, compassionate sadness for that, because you also know what it's like to be completely lost, and you are everyone else, so you understand. And how the ultimate being lost is you destroy yourself and your civilization and your beautiful world. That's the one side. The other side is that if you are accurate, you will be persecuted for it. No accurate prophecy goes unpunished. Uh, I have, in my own life, experienced what Nostradamus experienced when first he was published. Everybody was like, "Oh, isn't that interesting? These are very entertaining prophecies. Wow, very, very interesting." And I talk about this in detail in the first complete biography ever written about him, which I produced in 2003,
Yeah.
Nostradamus: A Life and Myth. And the the but then what started happening is he made many predictions in his own time that came true in his own time, much more than some famous psychics of our time, and it really rattled some people when he was right about the disasters, military disaster, in the Psalm at Psalm Quentin. Uh, that's when people started getting angry with it. They started saying, "Oh, he must be evil. He must be doing work of the devil." And then when he predicted he did an essay about an eclipse's impact on French future history a year before it happened. He talked about June of 1559 being a huge change. You could see civil wars, and if things happened the way they could happen. And of course, June was when the king died in a jousting accident, forcing kingdom to his underage children, weakening the top, and then the Huguenots and the Catholics started going to war with each other. One of the first of 8 civil wars over religion. The St. Bartholomew Massacre, which he foresaw, it happened in 1572, and so, but he started getting persecuted for that. There was when the king died, the night the king died, he was hundreds of miles south in Provence back home, but there were a crowd of people that came to the church justices in Paris and demonstrated in front of the steps of the church justices with effigies of Nostradamus set on fire, saying, "Do this in earnest." You see even ambassadors, educated men in the surviving letters talking back and forth from different embassies about Nostradamus's next prophecy hammer to fall in the coming years. And then you see, well, they say that the Francis is second is going to die, and then another. And then after it happened, the letters are saying they should punish such a man for saying such things.
So you felt, you felt persecuted basically
It happens. I mean, it happens. People. It's like the story of the ugly woman who, wherever she goes, if there's a mirror, she breaks the mirror. And she says, "These mirrors are making me look ugly."
Well, okay. Yeah, no, I completely understand where you're coming from.
Holding up a mirror and the fist goes through the mirror to the face.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing, isn't it? How do we bring this back in this interview to maybe saying there's something more? Okay, well, we'll talk about the future in just a moment. Some of the future, some of the future stuff. But do we have to, as a conscious species, go through this unforeseeable, destructive future? I mean, me and you, we have no free will in that sense in one perspective, because we're not in charge of the bigger system. I was born into the system. This is how it is. But I choose to do a show like this to try to make a difference in the world. You choose to get these predictions out there and the work of Nostradamus to try to show what potential is going to happen, so that we can avert such things. That if there's someone out there listening, maybe it goes back to what we were saying to begin with. what I was saying, that maybe you were agreeing with as well, that really all we can do in times like right now is just be as loving as possible to ourselves and others, and hoping that has some sort of ripple effect, because that's all we've got really, isn't it? I mean, what more do we have than that to just improve our own lives? We can't change these bigger pictures, can we?
Well, these bigger pictures are the consequences of masses of people thinking first that they're masses of people, and so the it can't. Here's a fine line. I remember one time Osho had a Korean activist, political activist, come and talk. He took sannyas, took disciplehood, and he was thinking, but maybe I shouldn't continue my work because I'm a political activist. Because at that time, Dictator Park of South Korea was running Korea like a police state. And his daughter now runs Korea, but is more democratic. But Osho's response, I think, answers some of this, that I recall what I heard him say. He said, no, don't. This is your work. This is what you do. To become a sannyasana, I am not telling you to renounce what you do. What you do is important and necessary to bring more awareness and freedom to the Korean people. I am just simply saying, add meditation to it. Whatever you are, whoever you are, add a watchfulness to it. Become more aware, more sensitive, more alert to how you participate in the greater mass mess, through being aware of your ego, being aware of how many of your identities are borrowed. And then when you start seeing these things, you start to remember that which is not borrowed, that which you came into the world with. And from there, one can build. I mean, I'm on your show. I'm speaking to you and your listeners, and I have been on. Tomorrow I'm doing a show for arts and entertainment in Seattle. My response, I can say, is what I'm doing is I have found a way to bring people's interest in something we're all interested in, the future, and do so as a device to bring them to what makes the future tick or fail. And that's us in the here now, not living our full potential. So I'm actually anti-prophetic. It's kind of a cosmic joke that I am so involved in the future, because really I'm about being here in the eternity of the present. And so all of my work is a way to capture your interests in what's coming next and take you to where what's coming next is born. And it's born in the eternity of the present. And it can then echo a more beautiful future, if we change our course. But this is the other thing that's hard to understand. It goes against the grain of all of our conditioning. The individual is more important than the entire human race. The individual just doesn't understand the subtle importance of that. The individual is not insignificant. Meditation makes them insignificant. We live in insecurity, but if you meditate, you start living in insecurity, with a big IN. And the world goes on. Osho used to talk about a Noah's Ark of consciousness is needed. He started talking about how there could be major global warming, things like that. Back in 82, 83, he was talking about these things. He also was very accurate in he didn't often talk about the future, but he was always very accurate. So he then said that, this time around, there's no Noah's Ark for us to board. What we need to create in all of us is a Noah's Ark of consciousness. A consciousness that can be a peaceful witnessing eye in the storms of the coming times. And so you have the power, and you have immediately now. Right now, we can see it and understand. So you are empowered as an individual. the illusion of the collective is definitely affecting our individual lives, but it is not, it is the consequence of millions of people not being awakened to their own individual truth and then finding that equally unique truth in everyone else and creating a society based on that. And there are prophecies about a new humanity coming out of all these crises. It is a potential. I don't want to make you think, oh, well, then I can sit back and wait for that to happen. Like I've even seen some people in these new age groups that say, well, I'm going to die now, so I'll be reincarnated when all that has happened. And I say, no, it doesn't happen unless you build a bridge to it. That bridge to utopia requires your activity now. And that new man doesn't live in the past or the future. He lives in the eternity of the present. So if you want to bring him to life right here, right now, you must not wait 300 years. You have to become that new man.
That is so true. And one of the things I'm going to do in the not too distant future, not yet, but in the not too distant future, is I will have my own news network. How that's going to manifest, I'm not even that bothered right now. I just know I'm going to do this. And it will be an alternative news network coming from, looking at the news from a spiritual perspective, not like the Alex Jones show or anything like that. I'm talking about a completely different perspective.
Thank God.
Yeah.
I even think he's a government plant in some ways. If he's not, he's certainly playing into all the insanity.
Well, yeah, exactly. Look. I'm all about reporting the alternative news, and I think like you mentioned before, Russia Today and all that, they've all got their good angles, and I wouldn't ignore that part. But you cannot get sucked into the fear base. That's not helping no one. And that's not self-empowering. There's never a solution in that. There's just, but we are then a society that loves to be addicted to different things, and fear is a big addiction. So, but every soul has their purpose, don't they? So it's easy for me to say these things, but yet he's living a purpose.
Well,
as hard as that is to see, he is.
Well, purpose. I would say no, because purpose implies intent. Intent implies a conscious understanding. He is a consequence. All of us, when we do things unconsciously, are just machines of happenstance and consequence of being machines doing what we're doing unconsciously. I mean, and I would say that maybe there is no purpose at all. A lot of enlightened mystics talk about how about choiceless awareness, which implies to me that the mind is always trying to either be either or either. The mind can never. For instance, my mother just died 3 months ago, and she was like a soulmate to me. And she was also she died beautifully. She had a very ecstatic, rare death. The whole room filled up with a vast presence, and as she died, she was breathing out, going, ah, ah, like that, and she died in mid, ah, like that. So she saw. So there is so much more that we do not see beyond the veil of our egos and our illusion of being separate from the whole. And in the process of that, I've come to understand, because it really changed me, her death, we were so close, that I start to understand, I think, what Osho meant by choiceless awareness. It doesn't mean you don't choose. You follow your nature, but you see things as not to. And there's a beautiful meditation that has really helped me right now, is when I'm feeling afraid, deep inside I feel the essence of not to. If there's fear, there's courage hidden. If I feel hopeless, not to. There is hope and hopelessness are one, two sides of the same coin. If I feel grief at the loss of my beloved mother, not to. She is not just dead. She is reborn into something new at the same time. And I, who am alive, am also death, not to. So what happens is that it awakens something in us that's non-dualistic. I'll simply say that. Although it cannot be if you say anything about it, and mystics have to say, it's always a lie, because it's bigger than duality. It's bigger. Consciousness is bigger than the entire universe. The universe contains this phenomenal, the consciousness contains this phenomenal mortal universe. Um, and I mean, I felt it so much when she died. There was such an amazing radiance coming off of her. She had died the great death, I think. I don't think she's coming back into form. It was such an amazing thing that when I walked down my long driveway, it was a beautiful summer day, as I always predicted. I said, "Mom, you're going to die in a beautiful summer day, midsummer day." And it was July 15th, and it was a beautiful day with beautiful burning white puffy clouds and a deep blue sky. And what I was feeling was something bigger than the entire sky was somehow coming down as grace. And that it was like I got a glimpse of what Buddha used to say. When I became enlightened, the whole world became enlightened with me. So that's not a goal, but a possibility of your insignificance, that if you awaken, the whole universe will awaken with you.
Because everyone's heart's beating as one, just like Matt Kahn told me, that everything is one, in a sense. So therefore, the love you give out, you get back. And I bet your mum's with you all the time. And not that that's where you would want her. I mean, it'd be so much loving and nicer to have her in the physical, of course. But
my mother is interesting because her name was a rare name. Osho very few times gave this name out to anybody. Her name was Dhyan Vipassana, meditation through the breath asana. So Vipassana was her name. And it's interesting because when I was reading to her in the final stages. And I was talking about the one time that I had a question declaration that I took 7 years to meditate on before I felt I was ready to say it. In a public discourse, it was written, and then it was told to him, and then he responded. And it was basically this, I paraphrase. When I look at the vast, moving, ever-changing world without, and when I look at my mind and emotions ever changing and churning within, I become aware of that which never changes. It is impossible to put in words what this is. I will say this, that sometimes it is so vast that it's not even there. And other times it is so small that it's unbearable. It moves through everything, but is perfectly free of everything. It is basically, it doesn't exist. And that's why, because it's free of existence, it's ever there. It doesn't exist because if you exist, it means you also will not exist. It's duality again. This thing is not duality. And it's everywhere. It's all of us. It is the whole. And when she died, he talked in that discourse about how, yes, this is it. He basically acknowledged that this, call it innocence. I call it, am I rediscovering my lost innocence? Because my name, Arjuna, sannyasa name, means innocence. Are you rediscovering your lost, am I rediscovering my lost innocence? And he went, Dhyan Arjuna. Yes. Very emphatic. She's not often emphatic. And he went talking about how religion is a rediscovery, how a religion is in sometimes triggered by the beautiful 9 months that we experience in our mother's womb. And it was interesting that he would talk that way, because I had a very beautiful experience in my mother's womb, because she was my soulmate and I was in her womb this time. And it was for me certainly wanting to get back to that feeling. So anyway, I was reading that to her, and then I stopped and said, Vipassana, he's not just talking about any old womb. He's talking about your womb. He's talking about us. And so that's our personal message beyond the collective. And she could only communicate to me by her exhalation of her Vipassana breath. But she was right there, and she was like going, ah,
It's almost like, at that point of death, she saw glimpses of where she was, where she'd been before. Yeah.
What I did, and this is important for everyone. Um, there was a discourse where a friend of mine said, and I needed it because I didn't know what I was at a loss. I was tired. I'd been sleeping at the foot of her bed for 6 days, and each night being there on the vigil, and I was feeling, man, I'm tired. I don't know if I think the big moment is coming, and I'm not ready for it. And then I remembered a sannyasins friend of mine, an old girlfriend of mine, gave me a quote from The Razor's Edge, where a German sannyasin and her boyfriend had gone to see his dying father, and he was saying, I feel like I'm in two bodies, and one's really sick and the other's healthy. What should I do? And the girl said, I think you should go to the healthy body. So this German father suddenly got a lot better, went home from hospital, and then died in his sleep peacefully in his own bed. But she felt like she missed something, that she could have said something more. And so she's asking Osho, well, did I miss something? And he said, yeah, you did. It was beautiful what you did, but you need to take him to the next step. Next step is that you're not that healthy body, your spiritual body, you're not that either. You're the mirror-like witnessing eternal consciousness. And you're never been embodied. It is just an appearance that you've identified with. And then you would have felt, and then he started talking about all the things that happened to, I mean, he said, when death comes, people, even if you were Adolf Hitler, there's a point in death where it's very easy to let go of it all because it's dying all around you, your mind, your body, your emotions. And that's why the Tibetans have created the Bardo Thodol, this whole science of helping people get enlightened or find better lives in the act of death. And so I was doing a kind of variation on the theme of that. And so I started, and I knew what to say to her. I said, Vipassana, I think you're going to go soon. And she was like, yeah. And so right now I'm whispering in her ear, I say, you're probably feeling that you're withdrawing from your physical body into your spiritual body. But I want to remind you that you are not any of these bodies. You are the mirror-like consciousness. You are free of all bodies. And that's when her ecstatic utterances began. And I read a little more from The Inescapable, which is a discourse of Osho in the Tahui series, which he said came closest in words to saying what cannot be expressed. So when your meditation has illuminated all the lies, then you are faced with confronting the inescapable truth that you become one with. I was reading that to her at the point when her ecstasies became so blissful, so happy, and then this incredible presence came into the room. The hospice nurse was there and witnessed it. So I had a witness to it. That it was this presence that was like the whole universe coming in. It was vast and beautiful and ecstatic. It was orgasmic. And then she just matched it and went off. So there I was on the driveway 20 minutes later, walking down, feeling the grace of that coming down. So now, what he said in that discourse to me about lost innocence rediscovered is that the difference, the experience in the womb is a very small taste of what it's like to be the sage. The enlightened sage has no mind of worry, he's like the baby floating innocently in the womb. Only his womb is the whole cosmos. So he trusts life. He's choiceless in his awareness. He follows his nature where it goes. There's no decision to be made. He follows his nature. There's not this or that, because this or that are one in him. So I realized then that, to answer your question about our statement about how I feel about Vipassana now, is that Vipassana has become the whole. And now I feel like I'm once again in her womb. Only now there's no her. It is the oceanic consciousness. So I feel that her love, our love, is my bridge into my own disillusion into that.
Well, it definitely, yeah, it's very beautiful what you're saying. It's definitely the right sort of ending to this show as well, because it brings us back into that enlightenment, into the possibility, into the vastness of the unnameable source that we really are. And it seems very much to want to be veiled when we come down to this level, to have this crazy experience of opposites, because it's only here you can seem to get the craziness, the insanity that we've of the future, potential future that's there in this world right now. It must be very important for the consciousness to need this. It must be. Does it need to be so violent all the time and so difficult? Do we need to do things so difficult as a collective group? Well, no, but that's the only way we know. And I think through work like yourself, it helps us to, realize that there is a way forward.
Well, and also, we don't need to make this a nightmare, this dream. We can make this a very beautiful dream. There's a prophecy about Meher Baba. There's a prophecy told by Meher Baba about that the time we're living in now he called it the manyness of illusion. And that it would take 700 years for the illusions to drop away to a paradise on earth, which he called the paradise of one illusion. So we don't need to have this experience in form be the way it is now. That's because we're like people who are put into a vehicle, a car, driving down the timeline of destiny. And we've been taught by our societies to think that we're the car, not the driver. Everybody needs to start thinking about, and if they can only think, then think it. If they can go deeper than that, then they go deeper into that. And to be it, we need to remember that the hammer is not more important than the hand that is holding it. The car is driven by the soul. Not in a seed form, but whatever you can to nourish it with the waters of love, with the right soil of understanding, and so that your great Bodhi tree shall flower.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we didn't get into, thank you for all this, by the way, we didn't even get into future predictions, where mankind is going to head in the next couple of 100 years or even 1,000 years. We will have to do that on another show, and I will always refer back to this show because you've covered some great stuff here by bringing it back to where we need to be, I think, as well. I think it's very important that we get that of all the things that you've said as well, bringing it back to the consciousness and the enlightenment that you've found as well on your path and relating that into this journey as well. I think that's so important. Well, we have a few more minutes, but we've been putting your website on the screen as well throughout this interview. And if you just give us your website just as a podcast for the podcast version.
Yes, it is HogueProphecy.com. That's www.HogueProphecy.com, all one word. And that's where I do my articles. Usually every weekend I have a few articles or several articles related to current events. The book that I have out that you can find at amazon.co.uk, and also in amazon.de and in NL in the Netherlands and in France, all over Europe actually, as well as in America, is my ebook on Nostradamus, Premonitions of 911. It's it's my most autobiographical book, very intimate exploration into premonitions. Has a lot of the vibe of this show today.
Yeah.
In it. And it's also available at Lulu. If you go to lulu.com, you can also get it mailed to you as a physical book. So, yes, I hope to help you, Kevin, with your endeavors because this is really where it's going in the future with journalism. Journalism is now, because the officials who used to be the journalists are no longer journalists. Now the people have to be their own
Well,
journalists.
they do. I mean, my background was in TV radio, and it's just shifted so much. There are no jobs out there as such as there used to be, and the empowering thing is now you can be your own output. You can, as I want to do in the future, set your own news network up if that's something that you so desire to do to help the shift in mankind and to help yourself as well. That's going to be something you want to do, whatever you do, your passion. But yes, you're right. It's shifting, and it's still shifting. But it still goes to show to me just how much power the media still has in one sense when you go to look at it from the perspective of the elections right now in America. But as you say, it's shifting, and the future is not good. It's going to shift even more as well. So it's exciting times. It really is. Is there any final message you might like to give to the audience?
Well, one little bit of hope about all the really scary stuff I said about a possibility of a thermonuclear war. When Osho made his prediction about the Noah's Ark of Consciousness in 1983, it was triggered by his concern that something was about to happen between the Soviet Union and Ronald Reagan's America that could accidentally start a thermonuclear war. And that was the first time he ever even thought about taking our commune underground, and was asking his secretary to see if there was land on our 64,000 acre ranch that could be used as a place to preserve us in what was coming. And then he gave his famous Noah's Ark of Consciousness prophecy. But what then happened in 1984, we had the gathering of our world gatherings in the Guru Purnima in July every year, and we had millions. We had 20,000 people come and sit in silent meditation and celebrate and dance, and the energy was so vast and beautiful that he later said after that festival, he said, "I believe that your meditation has averted this danger," and it did. There was the issue that the president had made his evil empire speech, and the Russians thought he meant it. And Andropov, who was the premier, was seriously considering a first strike. And so but Gorbachev told him that he was probably just trashing talk to all those evangelical ministers that he was making the speech to. And so the power of consciousness can influence the unconscious people. So your meditation, the more you bring meditation into the world, the more you're bringing the opportunity for this war and this global warming not to happen.
And that's a message that when I have my network up and running in the future, I will definitely promote on there as well, most definitely. Well, and it doesn't mean I can't promote it in my life right now, neither as well. It doesn't have to wait for that. But well, look, John, I'd just like to say thank you so much for coming on today. It's been a complete pleasure, and I will get you back on in the not too distant future when when the new book comes out as well. So, John, thank you.
Thanks for having me on, Kevin. Bless you.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.com, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.